Welcome to this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us author Bob Martin, and we'll talk about a lot of things, also about his new book that we'll talk about in depth. And we'll understand about him in much more detail directly from him itself. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Bob. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll talk about your book, I Am the Way, Finding the Truth and the Light through a biblical reimagining, reimagining of the Tao. Okay, we'll talk about. But before that, Bob, let's understand a bit about your journey, your background, especially about your transformation from a mob lawyer to a meditation teacher.
um, well, I'll tell you, there's lots of stories to be told. But yes, that's true. I grew up in an amusement park, and my father never thought, and neither did I think, that I would wind up being a lawyer. But there was a young friend that I had that kept pushing me. You should be a lawyer. You should be a lawyer. And so I got pushed, and law school took a chance on me, and I became a lawyer. And I prosecuted in Miami during what was called the infamous cocaine cowboy days. Those were the days of the movie Scarface and the TV show Miami Vice. It's when the Colombians and the Italians and the Peruvians and the Cubans and the Haitians all combined together to transport cocaine through Miami, and it was a wild time. And I was hired by the state's attorney, a lady named Janet Reno, who later became one of President Clinton's attorney generals. And she hired me and had a lot of faith in me, and I rose to the top of the office, and we prosecuted the mob in a civil case, something called a racketeering charge, hit them for a lot of money, over 70 million. And then I left the office shortly after that, and the mob came to see me. And I called him Johnny. He was a member of the Italian family. And basically he said that, you beat our lawyers, and our lawyers are pretty good, so you got to be pretty good, and we want to hire you. So that's how that happened. And a lot of stories around that, but a long story short, I was hanging out with these guys, and my behaviors, I would say, became a little bit excessive. And we'll just leave it at that. My private and personal life was kind of falling apart. So I was seeing a therapist, and I came to a very important crossroads in my life. And I asked my therapist what I should do. And rather than giving me some therapeutic response like, well, Bob, what do you think you should do? He picked up some coins. He started raising them in his hands, dropping them and counting them and making lines on a piece of paper. And he finally came up with a number, and he opened up a book to that chapter, and it said retreat. And I cursed him out, because I was paying him to be my therapist, and here he is throwing coins. But it was the right advice. I had to pull back, and I did. I came back to see him, and I said, what was that? Turned out that my therapist was one of the main students and an English language editor for, dig this, a 72 generations of passing wisdom down from father to son. He was a 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple, the Kung Fu Temple, and in China. And so I didn't know anything about Taoism then. I didn't grow up in a religious family, and But for your listeners that may not be too familiar with it, it's kind of a sister of Buddhism. It's along the same track, slightly different, with a different purpose. But Master Ni, watching Ni, was this man, and he came to Miami, and I gotta tell you, sometimes you run into somebody that you immediately know that this guy's got it. He knows what's going on, and I just wanted to know what he knew, and I asked him to teach me, and I studied under him for 6 years. And I practiced the Taoist practices and the like, and it changed my life. And then that's how the transformation came about. It's quite a common story, really. It's hitting bottom, going down the rabbit hole, needing help, reaching out, and finding a mentor. It's like the traditional hero's journey. You find the mentor, and the mentor changes your life. You go on to the new world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You may call it a normal story, but every story is a story, and each story matters to its audience in its own way. That's why stories are told, and every story becomes special in that, in that normal way, if we want to use it that way. So I want to understand, how did this whole journey about the author, becoming an author, begin for you? What inspired you exactly? Means I also can meet an editor, I can also meet an author like you, but I'm not an author in that sense, Bob. So it has to have something much more beyond just meeting people. It has to be from within.
Well, I guess it started out a little bit after 9/11, when the big attack came to New York City. And I saw that, again, I didn't grow up in a religious family, and so religion and belief and faith and all of those things were always inquiries for me. They're curiosities. Like, I wanted to understand them better. And then, in learning under Master Ni, I came to understand them better. But it's always been an inquiry. I've always been curious. I always want to know more about it. And when 9/11 came about, everybody was running around killing people in God's name. And I wound up writing a novel, which, we'll talk about that on another time. But that gave me the confidence that I could write a book. So fast forward, I have a little trouble with my mob clients. I moved to North Carolina, which is what here in America we call the Bible Belt. It's the area of the country that is deeply, deeply conservatively religious Christian. And the people here believe the historical facts of the Christian Bible. And that's not something that I was ever exposed to. When I got here, there weren't a lot of Taoists. So I started attending Buddhist temples, and I learned to meditate and teach it. But eventually I found that the wife that I was with, we had grown apart, we got divorced. And then I met my current wife, and she is an absolute saint. I had, at that point in my life, devoted myself to taking care of what we might refer to as the least of these. And so did she. And so we supported each other in our values, but her Christian thinking, she was a born-again Southern Baptist Bible literalist. She literally believed in everything the Bible said. So I could not accept her science that the world was 4,000 years old and Noah's Ark and Garden of Eden and all that stuff. She thought all my stuff was real weird, she'd never been exposed to any of it, but we both understood that we were deeply spiritual. So it's funny, her family now lives in Moultrie, Georgia, which is very, very conservatively Christian. And when when it came to the point that we announced that we were going to get married, they all warned her that she might be getting yoked to a heathen. But what happened was, as I, listened to her and, studied a little bit more about Christianity, which I hadn't had a lot of exposure to, although I had always had a deep love and affection for the great wisdom teacher, Jesus. So I started looking at what she thought about Jesus, and I started looking in the old texts of the Taoist writings, and what I discovered was there wasn't a hair's breadth of difference between the two of them. What Lao Tzu taught, 2,500 years ago, Jesus taught 2,000 years ago, and Buddha taught 2,700 years ago, and Confucius taught, and Gandhi taught, and it was all. I believe they all came and they all taught because they realized, and they just wanted us to be happy. And they realized that to be happy, you have to walk on the road of love, kindness, peace, generosity, wisdom, empathy, sincerity, authenticity. These are the ways to have a life where you're happy. And I think that they all just wanted us to be happy. So as I went down this journey, I said, well, let me tell you that the original writing of the Taoism is called the Tao Te Ching. And Ching means a classical book. The Tao means the way, and Te means virtue. So the Tao Te Ching is the classical book of the way of virtue. And if you know Jesus, as is the name of my book, Jesus said, I am the way. Well, maybe he was saying, I am the Tao, because Tao means the way. So I thought that was a great title for the book. But anyway, the way that I got it was I would take a look at one of the writings in the Tao Te Ching, and I would say, let me have a thought experiment here. Let me see if I can look into the Bible and at Jesus's teachings and see if I can find a teaching that teaches the same thing. And then let me see if I can somehow kind of following in the same cadence as the writing of the Tao Te Ching. Because if anybody's ever looked at, these Chinese writings and the sayings of Confucius, they're very dense and they're very pithy. They're very concise, and there's a lot in them. And I say, let me see if I could follow that same cadence and reimagine it as a Christian statement, a Christian poem. Let me see if I can put it in the Christian language, the same teaching. And there are 81 of them. So I started out randomly picking a couple, and I would play with it for a little bit, and I'd show it to my wife, and she goes, wow, that's really good. Where did you get that? And then I would show her the original writing, the original Tao Te Ching, and she goes, you got that from this? I said, yeah, well, and a little bit of Master Neat's teaching and the like. He says, this is really good. So I did another one and another one and another one. And finally, I did the whole book. I translated all 81 meditations or poems or chapters that you might call them. And I put them together in a book with a little bit of unpacking and a little bit of commentary and a wise quote from a wisdom teacher somewhere per chapter. And so I had it. Now the question was, how do you get it published?
Absolutely. So how did you get it published? Who showed you the way?
Well, my wife would say that it was a God thing. And I always question, I always wonder about, are things just coincidental, that they just happen to happen at the same time? Or is there some kind of synchronicity? Is there some force that glues things together and brings things together at just the right time? I don't know. But I was a lawyer, and then I was also teaching law at a university, and there was a a textbook salesperson who came to see me about selling me a textbook. And their firm was Kendall Hunt. And I was talking to her, and somehow we got onto the subject of Taoism and Christianity and spirituality, and we just had a wonderful conversation. Even, we left the school and had a cup of coffee, and we just kept talking. And I told her about my book and what I had written, and she says, we have a subsidiary called Innovative Inc., and this is just the kind of thing they may like. I'm going to talk to the acquisition editor over there. And so she did. And I got this phone call from the acquisition editor. He says, well, I heard about your book and we're interested in it. Can you send me a manuscript? So I did. And she goes, yeah, this is good. We're going to publish this. We like it. And then, we had to design the cover and design the pictures and the layout. They did all that, of course. The traditional publishers do that. And Innovative Inc. is an absolutely, fantastic publishing house. They did so much help and helped me design the thing. And so we published the book. We got the book out. And can I share with you what opens my heart up about all this?
Of course, of course.
So there are so many people that left the church because of the our way or the highway, the very restrictive stuff. If you don't believe the way we want you to believe, you're going to burn in hell forever. Of course, people that are on the margins were often hurt terribly by the church, especially folks that are in the LGBT community, and the gays and the like. And so there's a lot of people that just left the church because of its rigidness. And I'm getting letters from all over the country now where people say, thank you so much for your book. I had left the church and I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. I also left my relationship with the divine, and you have given me a way to recover that relationship without having to worry about the rigidness of the church. And thank you so much. So that does good. But the most important thing was that when I showed the final manuscript to my wife, she sat down and she read it. And when she was done with it, she goes, Bob, preachers have told me what to do and what not to do, and they told me about heaven, and they told me about the Bible, and we studied the path of the 7 tribes of the Jews and all that, but nobody has ever explained Jesus to me as well as these writings do.
Absolutely, Bob. So for a common person, means how should they understand what this book is all about? Maybe in someone in India who does not know much about about the religious part of things.
Okay, so let's take a second and talk about Taoism itself, okay, and what it is. Because Taoism is not it's not God-based at all. It's very physics-based. It's about the flow of energy from the positive to the negative, like a battery. It's like it is a manual, a handbook for how to live life in a way where Master Ni described in a masterful way. And what he meant by that was, we asked him, what does it mean to master life, Master Ni? And he said, if you can interfere with the natural flow of things the least, and yet have the required and appropriate impact, you have begun to master life. And the Tao Te Ching is a book simply of wisdom. I'll give you some examples. When Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, talks about leadership, he says, you should not aspire to leadership. It's a drag on the soul. But if called, you should step up and lead. And when your work is done, you should step down so that your work is what's important, not your ego. And if you look at leaders who are so egotistical that they take pride and they take honor and they take power from their leadership, they generally are not very happy people. And eventually their leadership becomes frayed. He says, yes, there are good times when you are in abundance, but during those good times, it's always good to remember to put a little bit aside, because there will be times that come where you will need what you saved. It's these kinds of tips and these kinds of ways of learning how to live life masterfully that is the Tao Te Ching. But it's not available, to the Western mind. You guys in India, you're kind of like halfway in between, the West and the East, Of course, Hindu was the mother of Buddhism. So what is in the Bhagavad Gita is the same teaching. And one of these days, I would love to collaborate with a Hindu and do a book like this, translating the wisdom of the Tao into terms and metaphors that would map onto the Hindu mind. I would love to do that. But it's all the same. Everything that Krishna taught is the same of what Jesus taught. It is the same of what Lao Tzu taught. We're all brothers and sisters all over the world. And living life the right way that leads to happiness is the same in whatever culture you're in.
Absolutely. Wonderfully said, wonderfully explained, Bob. So anything in particular, any favorite thing that you would want to read out for the audience, something that is very close to you?
To read?
Yes. Any particular passage or few sentences, anything that you would want to?
Yes. I have to get up to get the book. Hold on.
No problem. No problem. If you can't see it, no problem. The book is, we can see the book.
I'm so sorry. I rearranged my office yesterday and I don't know where I put that.
No problem. No problem. I have totally understand. Even it happens to me almost every day about one thing or the other. Sometimes, especially, in podcasting, you just kept the thing in front of you and then the second you need it, it's not there. So, Bob,
Yeah.
I want to understand, in terms of the challenging part, most challenging part of this book, writing this book, what was it?
It took 4 years. To take something that is written in one culture and in a non-God based philosophy, and then shift it over to a completely different culture that is a God-based philosophy is challenging. I mean, that's just challenging. And then trying to, at the same time, keep the same kind of cadence and feel of the original writing is, it's poetry, and poetry itself is, challenging. So it was writing, and it would take everything I had to do 2 or 3, and then I would I'd leave it alone for a few weeks just to recover, and then go back at it. when you are committed to something, when your heart is in it, when you are determined to do it, you can afford to leave it alone and allow your heart to make you go back to it. And so sometimes, sometimes a couple of months would go by, but then I would start, I got to do another one. I got to do another one. And I would go back to it. And I guess that's the difference between, kind of walking away from something and not going back to it. It's that you're just devoted to it. You have to be devoted to it.
Absolutely, you have to be devoted to it. So I want to understand, in a nutshell, what is the key message that you want, or key lesson inside that you want readers to take away from this book?
The thing that's important is that in the back of the book, in the appendix, is the original translation from the Chinese, so that you could read this one chapter and then you could look at the original chapter and see the two cultures at the same time. What I want them to know is that the Tao Te Ching is not something that you read cover to cover. You read it one page and you put it down and you let it sink into your heart. I'm so upset that I don't have that right in front of me. Sad. What a shame. So it is something that you read once. It's like a devotional. It's like reading a teaching, and then you live with it for a day. Some people call these kinds of books devotionals, where every day, you have a thought for the day. And so, it may be 2 paragraphs, a chapter may be 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. So it's not something that you read from cover to cover. You open it, you read one chapter, 3 or 4 paragraphs, and you take from that something into your life. The Tao Te Ching changed my life, and anyone that I know that is a Taoist, these are sweet and good people. So, if you want to find a handbook for how to live a wise and happy life, this is the book.
Absolutely. And there is another book on the way, The
On the
Children
way.
of Abraham. Tell us a bit about that book. When is it? What it is all about?
Well, it's interesting, since we're talking to you in India. When I started writing the book, I had to make a decision. That's what. So what the book is about? The book is about, again, it's one of those things. I'm always curious about religion. But after the America was attacked in 2001 in New York, all of the Persians and Arabs were running around, and Americans, were running around killing each other in God's name, for the purpose of, God's on our side. And even in wars, people always say, may God bless our troops. Come on. I mean, really? Why? And I would think that God might be up in heaven if he spoke and he thought like we do, and he might be looking down at our world and say, yeah, not what I intended for you guys. So could he come down and tell us what he wanted for us, what his intention was? So that was my thought experiment. And so he came down in my novel in the little ticker tapes along the bottom of your TV screen, leaving message like, you're all my children, God, take care of the paradise I created for you, God. And at first everybody thinks it's a hoax. I've got 7 characters, and they range from Palestinian to Jewish to Arab, Persian, American, Latin, and the like. And I had to make a decision, because the whole world is not just comprised of the Abrahamic religions. There's Hindu, there's Taoism and Buddhism and Confucianism and all of the other native indigenous peoples religions. But I had to make a decision. I said, it'd be impossible for me to write this novel and include it all. So I had to narrow it down just so that I could make it manageable. So that's why I just stayed with the Abrahamic religions. But it's an interesting novel. It's a mystery story. It's really a psychological drama about who would redeem, what kinds of human faults are redeemable. And the biggest question of the book is, if God made himself known to us as fact, not belief, would we even listen to him? Or would we still go about our own craziness? So that's what the book's about.
Wonderful, wonderful. There is so much to learn from you about all these things, and I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in knowing more about you, about your books, especially the present one that you are talking. The new one, obviously, it is on its way, so it will come. So what's the best way for people to connect with you, learn more about what you are doing, and also get hold of the book?
Now, as far as getting a hold of the book, there would be the web site iamthewaybook.com. iamthewaybook.com. And if they want to know more about me and keep up with that and know more about meditation and happiness and how to be happy, they could go to my website, awiseandhappylife.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ. And for those who are listening, if you like this conversation, like to talk about it, do buy this to get a hold of a copy of the book and explore more. With this, thank you so much indeed for joining us.